afternoon. My name is Tristan Porter, and I chose to research the Roslyn School District embezzlement case. For 8 years, the top officials of a wealthy Long Island school district illegally diverted over $11.2 million to themselves and relatives for an array of expenses ranging from dog food to a mortgage on a luxury home in Florida. The scandal in Roslyn, New York, was the largest embezzlement of school district funds to occur in the United States. The fraud was perpetrated by the school superintendent and other administrators. Initial evidence of the fraud was discovered 2 years before the formal investigation. However, a series of cover-ups, along with substandard audit work, allowed the embezzlement to continue. After the scandal was brought to light, state regulators responded with the passage of a series of fiscal reform legislation aimed at improving school district internal control. This was done through changes in school district governance, independent auditing, and state agency oversight. Frank Tazzone was a widely admired superintendent of the Roslyn School District. He was a charismatic administrator and insisted on personally meeting every new student. He regularly lunched with high school students and even led a book club for the district's parents. In 2002, his assistant superintendent had been caught stealing $250,000. She wrote checks to cover her credit card bills and racked up large purchases at a Home Depot a couple towns away. During a school board meeting, Tazzone made a compelling argument for compassion and leniency. He argued that his assistant, Pam Gluckin, was ill, her marriage was falling apart, and she was desperate. He claimed if the board didn't press charges, she would agree to resign, give up her administrator's license, and give back the money. Not all the members went for it at first. Tazzone warned that if this sort of thing wasn't handled carefully, it could take years to go away. His message was that no good could come from going public with the information. Voters would not re-elect school board members who let something like that happen in the first place. Eventually, the board members agreed not to press charges if Pam resigned. The board didn't know Tazzone was not protecting only Pam, but also himself. Tazzone was quietly running one of the most daring scams to affect a public school system. He engaged in expense account padding, vendor bidding violations, check record fabrications, even the creation of phony businesses. Tazzone had the district pay for 2 trips to London, one for $20,000 and one for $30,000. $1,800 per night suites on 6 separate trips to Las Vegas with the high school's principal, and he transferred $300,000 to each of his sisters in separate bank accounts. What is just as surprising as the amount he was able to steal right from under the district's nose is the fact that Tazzone had been living a double life. Tazzone seemed to be a bachelor with an old wedding photo on a shelf in his office, and who spoke of his late wife who had died of cancer. It turned out that he was living with one man in Manhattan while also owning a house in Las Vegas with a 32-year-old male exotic dancer. After an anonymous letter was sent to a local politician, a full investigation was launched in February 2004. More than half of the $11 million was embezzled in a scheme in which Tazzone, Gluckin, and 9 of their family members and friends charged $5.9 million for personal items and cash advances on 74 separate personal credit cards. To pay for those bills, district checks were sent directly to the card issuers. The district's financial software could be easily manipulated and had fraud controls that had never been activated. Using a legitimate vendor account number, the name of the check's recipient was changed from a vendor of school supplies to the creditors. After the check was issued, the name of the payee would be changed back in the computer record to the legitimate vendor to conceal the fraudulent payment. When a budget category came close to its limit, school officials were able to shift funds among accounts. Tazzone had been granted unlimited authority by the school board to make those transfers, even though state education regulations required the board to set limits on the amounts that can be transferred without board approval. The district's treasurer, who was a custodian of all district funds, rarely attended board meetings and infrequently reported on the budget. Tazzone and Gluckin consolidated their control over the district's finances by installing clerks responsible for monitoring both accounts payable and accounts receivable. The scheme used to steal $11.2 million from the Roslyn School District was relatively simple. 2 officials compromised the district's accounting controls and gave bonuses to almost everyone who had oversight of the spending. This scandal led to a public outcry for reform and stricter fiscal oversight of school boards in New York. Legislators, the Office of the State Comptroller, state education associations, and the NYSSCPA formed a coalition. They drafted legislation that required training for school board members on their financial oversight responsibilities, established an internal audit function within each school district, created audit committees in school districts, mandated a competitive request for proposals process for selecting an audit firm, and required direct school board involvement in a formal response to issues raised in the annual external audit. The state legislature also directed the Office of the State Comptroller to conduct an audit of every public school district in the state over the course of 5 years. According to the State Comptroller's 2009 annual report, these audits found instances of outright fraud or theft in 19 other school districts. So to wrap up, in 2005, grand larceny charges were lodged against the former superintendent, his roommate, the district's former assistant superintendent, Pam Glucky, and her niece. Tazzone was released from prison in 2010 after serving roughly 3 years of a 4 to 12-year prison sentence. The scandal inspired a new movie called Bad Education. The film premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in September 2019 and will be released on HBO on April 25, 2020. Hugh Jackman plays Frank Tazzone and Allison Janney plays Pam Gluckin. Mike Makowski, who attended the high school during the time this fraud was occurring, actually wrote and helped produce the film. He commented, "How can you care so deeply about the students, education, and devote your whole life career to this very noble profession, but at the same time take in such an egregious way from the students, from the community, and from the taxpayers?" Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, please leave it in the comments below and I will try to answer it as soon as I can. Thank you.